The defendants are men of different profiles: firefighter, craftsman, nurse, prison officer, journalist, electrician, single, married, divorced. Most went once to the home of the main accused in the town of Mazan in the south of France. 10 went on several occasions, up to 6 nights in some cases.
Can you imagine spending your entire life sleeping in the same bed with someone you really don't know? 50 years married, a whole life together. Well, this is what Giselle lived through. It could be said that she had the perfect life, 3 beautiful children, and an exemplary husband and father. However, what she didn't know was that behind this perfect facade hid something she never imagined. The dark secret not only belonged to her husband, it involved her neighbors, the men she crossed paths with on the street or at the supermarket. Many of them were part of a totally chilling pact of silence. And it is that on the morning of Monday, September 2nd, 2024 in Avignon, a small city in the southeast of France, the criminal court opened its doors for one of the most disturbing trials in the country's recent history. Dominique Pelicot, 71 years old, appeared before the court along with 50 other men, all accused of committing one of the worst crimes against women. What did all these men do to Giselle? Well, the truth of the matter far exceeded fiction, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. A totally chilling and sad case as well. Giselle and Dominic started dating in the year 71 when they were 18 years old. Dominic was her first love, and she knew from the start that she wanted to spend her life with him. Shortly after, they got married and started a family with 3 children. Throughout the years, their love remained intact. The man continued to be a loving and considerate husband, and the love between them only theoretically strengthened more and more over time. Dominic deeply loved his children. He took them to school, picked them up from parties when it got late, cheered them on in their achievements, and comforted them in difficult times. He seemed like the ideal neighbor, the one who didn't cause any problems. In addition, he was a trained electrician, a successful businessman, and a passionate cyclist.
This is a man who had a hard life, who despite everything kept living, started a family, and at some point, something clicked once he retired, I guess, with less busy days and his childhood catching up with him.
On the other hand, the woman was the stable support of the family. She worked as a manager in a company in Paris where she was for 20 years. When they retired, the couple wanted to spend the rest of their lives in a cozier place. So they moved to a house with a large garden and pool in Mazan, a small town northeast of Avignon. There their life was idyllic. Giselle could finally rest from her years of effort and work. The couple regularly welcomed their 3 children and grandchildren during the summer holidays, with dinners on the terrace where the family debated, celebrated, had dance competitions, and enjoyed board games.
The events occurred in a village near Avignon in southern France.
As the years passed, their life remained as ordinary as any other couple's. However, Giselle was no longer the young woman full of vitality she used to be. In recent times, she had lost a lot of weight and also experienced a significant loss of hair. In addition, she began to suffer from episodes of amnesia, sometimes appearing to be in dreamlike trances. Her children and friends, on the other hand, began to fear that she might be developing Alzheimer's, especially now that she was approaching 70 years old. And although at first the woman attributed these problems to old age, by the end of 2020, a summons to a police station in southern France caused the facade of her perfect and exemplary marriage to completely collapse, and her health problems began to have an explanation. And it is that thanks to the authorities, she discovered a chilling story that brutally contrasted with the ideal life she believed she had. Before her terrified gaze, she had the evidence of the heartbreaking truth. Her beloved husband had used her to fulfill his darkest desires. But how Dominic was unmasked is what you might be wondering. Well, here it goes. The victim, who claimed to have no memories of what happened, found out at 68 years old when all the rapes came to light after her husband was caught in a shopping mall filming under the skirts of customers. Everything collapsed in September of the year 2020 when a security guard in a shopping mall of Carpentras in the south of France caught Dominique trying to film under the skirts of several women. He was immediately arrested and his belongings were confiscated. Upon checking his phone, the authorities came across a case that was going to shock all of France.
The accused faced sentences of up to 20 years in prison, and the defense of some argue that they did not realize the woman was unconscious.
In addition to his main mobile, the police also seized another cell phone, 2 cameras, and other electronic devices, including his computer, before releasing him on bail. However, the freedom of this perverse individual was numbered, as 300 photographs of women taken on the street without their consent were discovered on the devices. But Dominic was not just a repugnant street harasser, he was just the tip of the iceberg of all his crimes, of all his atrocities. Among the unpleasant files, authorities found a video of an unconscious woman being intimately assaulted by a man who was not Dominic. The victim was none other than Giselle, his wife. The horrifying images showed his victim in a state of complete unconsciousness in a fetal position, while a stranger intimately assaulted her in her own room. But that disturbing video was just one in a long list that kept growing. It turned out that his wife was completely oblivious to this perverse man's hobby and what really happened that night in their own bed, turning their home into a prison of which she had no knowledge. The wickedness of this creep was even meticulous, worthy of a night predator. On his computer, he had meticulously catalogued each file with dates, names or nicknames and titles not by Giselle.
She didn't remember being abused, neither by him nor by...
She recognized only one of the other men as a neighbor from town. Then, faced with the revealed truth, the victim felt disgust. She felt dirty, used and above all betrayed by the man who claimed to love her, who had sworn love to her. For her, it was like a tsunami, as if she had been hit by a high-speed train, just to give you an idea. The authorities were faced with an extensive list of crimes that they had to meticulously review, and the urgency of the situation demanded that they act quickly. For this reason, a highly select team of 4 investigators was formed, chosen not only for their experience, but also for their emotional strength to face the shocking content of the images they had to examine. The laborious work of reconstruction took a long 4 years, and from their photos, videos, and virtual activities, the police spent the next 2 years identifying and charging the other suspects. Thus, in the course of their investigation, they found over 20,000 videos and photographs, many of them dated and tagged in an electronic folder titled Abuse, located on a hard drive. Within this folder were other folders with the name and identity of each abuser, such as Chris the Fireman, David the Black, Gaston the Chop, Weston the Retiree, and so on, with almost 100 names that were in these folders. In others, he also kept thousands of photos of one of his daughters without clothes and asleep, as well as little girls and women in the bathrooms of various shopping centers. But to catch all his accomplices, the police started with an initial list of 11 Skype contacts and asked Microsoft to identify the associated IP addresses. Simultaneously, Dominic's phone bills were reviewed to track calls and messages. Each contact was thoroughly checked, cross-referencing the dates of the communications with the content of the images to link them to the attacks. Uncovering the identity of the abusers was a process, as you can imagine, long and complex because a lot of information had been deleted or was insufficient. For example, Dominic's personal phone had a lot of deleted data. But on the other hand, this pervert had a, let's say, fixation with the most brutal carnal details about violence against his wife, so he didn't always accurately photograph the abusers' faces. And to get to the identity of these jerks, the investigators then extracted images from the videos with the help of a facial recognition program used by the French police. This made it easier for them to identify a third of the accomplices. After years of meticulous investigation, the list of suspects grew to an exorbitant number of 83 men. Given the number of people involved, the police had to make the arrests in 5 waves between the end of the year 2020 and September of the year 2021. Several defendants stated that they only limited themselves to being part of this guy's fantasies of a fantasy supposedly of a libertine couple. However, as we know, the victim was never conscious and does not show any gesture apart in the thousands of images recorded, which would prove that there was no consensus that this was an abuse.
The audience to the victim, identified as Giselle, 72 years old, saw her husband Dominique, from whom she is about to divorce, and the other 50 men between 26 and 74 years old who committed the rapes. 18 of them are in preventive detention.
2 months after his detention at the shopping center, Pelicot was arrested again accused of aggravated intimate abuse and intoxication. He was also accused of violating the privacy of his wife, his daughter, and his 2 daughters-in-law under suspicion of illegally recording and distributing intimate photos of them. If he is found guilty of these crimes, he could face a sentence of up to 20 years in prison, which would be more of a stretch given his age. His perversions against his wife began in the year 2011 when Giselle allegedly refused to fulfill her husband's darkest fetishes. So not taking no for an answer, he bought the exorbitant amount of 450 pills to supply his criminal inventory. Each and every one would be for his wife. Intoxicated by her husband, she was assaulted 5 times a week, 285 times a year between July 2011 and October 2020 by more than 80 men. That's right, you're hearing this, 80 perverts.
Giselle Pelicot is seeking to ensure that no one repeats her story, which has shaken France after the trial against her husband Dominic began.
Movie. The aggressor took advantage of the blind trust his wife had in him. Family dinners suddenly turned into deadly traps. Dominic had been mixing sleeping pills like Temesta or Solpidem into the food and drink. After each dinner, the lady felt completely exhausted and weak, which led her to excuse herself and go to bed early. Obviously, as we already know, without suspecting the dark plan that was unfolding while she slept. When the wicked criminal saw his wife fall unconscious, leaving her completely at his mercy, he would let his accomplices into their family home. But before opening the door to the marital bed where his wife lay intoxicated and naked, he would make them pay a sum in exchange for delivering her as an object of intimacy. In addition, Dominic imposed on the men participating in the abuses certain rules as chilling as they were precise. Among them were not to wear perfume, to undress in the family kitchen, and to warm their hands so as not to wake her up. Once they complied with the procedure, he would not leave the room. He enjoyed the grotesque spectacle from the front row and recorded everything in photos and videos as a macabre collection of memories.
She wants to raise awareness about what happened to her so that events like these do not happen again. She knows there will be extremely difficult times, but she doesn't have to hide, and she doesn't have to be ashamed of what has happened.
Giselle divorced and changed her last name after her attacker's arrest. Now, in her 70s, she attended the trial against her ex-husband and dozens of other men, partially covering her face with dark glasses. She arrived in the courtroom accompanied by her children, now aware of everything their mother went through during their childhood. The brave victim was about to face not only her husband, but all those who participated in her worst nightmares. While French laws allowed her a closed-door trial to maintain her privacy, shielding the details of her attacks, the victim insisted that her case be public to raise awareness about these types of crimes and support other victims in similar situations who have not yet gathered the courage to report.
According to the lawyer of 2 of the defendants, the events are part of the husband's mental abnormality who wanted to drag the 50 defendants into his madness.
Giselle wished to set a precedent in her country, preventing men like her husband from continuing their unpunished acts. Her goal was that this type of abuse would not go unpunished. Despite the initial opposition of the prosecution and part of the defense, her request was accepted and the entire trial is being conducted publicly. During the trial, police officers presented the defendant's statements at the time of his arrest. It was revealed that Dominic began to intoxicate his wife in order to do things to her and also dress her in things that she normally refused when conscious. But that was not enough for him, and he wanted to take it a step further because over time he began to invite other men to participate in his abuses. He claims he never requested or took money for attacking his helpless wife. According to the investigation, the monster disguised as an exemplary husband met most of his accomplices in a chat room of a well-known French dating website called Coco.gg. which, by the way, this lady's case was not the only one in which this page participated, also implicated in more than 23,000 police cases just in France between 2021 and 2024. Because of this disturbing amount, it was finally closed down and its owner arrested. Also on this page, most of the users knew Dominic as someone without their consent.
In French, it would be a son insu. I'm going to write it down for you because obviously I don't know French. His motto was also, "You are like me, you like to abuse to that degree." This man was sick, according to experts. The accused do not suffer from significant psychological pathologies, although they have a feeling of omnipotence over the female body. Many claim that they believed they were participating in the fantasies of a libertine couple, but the victim's husband maintains that everyone knew she was drugged without her consent.
Of the 83 suspects, the police identified and charged 50. His accomplices were between 26 and 74 years old and formed the mosaic of French middle-class and working-class society: truck drivers, soldiers, carpenters, and laborers, a prison guard, a nurse, an IT expert who worked for a bank, and a local journalist. It was no surprise to anyone that many of them had children and were even in a model marriage, like this model marriage that Dominic had. While many of them had a past without any records, some of the accused had a long history of convictions for domestic violence or intimate abuse, sometimes of people, of little ones, of addiction to substances or alcohol, and of attraction to practices between children and adults, or also having intimacy with animals. And only one of them is not accused of intimately abusing Giselle, but that one, don't you think it made him less perverse than the others? Because instead, that man was accused of following the same model and of intoxicating his own wife as a kind of twisted apprentice of Dominic, who is accused of abusing, as I tell you, his wife while she was intoxicated. During the
controversial trial, some of the accused admitted their guilt, has recognized the facts in their entirety without trying to exonerate or minimize them, so that is their state of mind, and that is the line they will assume for the next 4 months.
During the controversial trial, some of the accused admitted their guilt. However, there were many others who declared themselves innocent and claimed to have been deceived by the mastermind of the attacks. According to them, the husband convinced them to have a threesome in which Giselle pretended to sleep because she was shy, while the husband watched the intimate encounter. Several others also commented that they believed she had consented to being drugged and abused as part of a fantasy. There were even some defendants who commented that they did not believe it was abuse because her husband was there and could give consent for both of them, as if this jerk owned the woman. Well, this trial not only caused a stir in the general population but also in the medical community, as the victim had visited gynecologists and neurologists for a series of baffling symptoms resulting from the drugs and abuses. However, she never received any diagnosis. By the way, for Gada Ganser, a well-known gynecologist, obstetrician, and expert in violence against women, it was disturbing that no doctor considered the hypothesis of intimate abuse. This showed that there were things that needed to be changed in medical education, so she and the pharmacist developed a training for doctors and nurses on the symptoms that victims of drug-facilitated intimate assaults can experience.
Giselle was accompanied by her 3 children during a first hearing, in which the person she was married to was also present.
50 years. On the other hand, and if you were wondering, throughout the exposition of the facts, Dominique remained impassive, occasionally conversing with his lawyer Beatrice Avaro, or looking around the room, where his ex-wife and children were, by the way. When his time came to testify, the defendant responded with a yes when asked if he was guilty. And although his victim showed no emotions, the couple's 3 children sitting next to their mother struggled to contain their shock. On 2 occasions, his daughter left the room in tears and trembling, especially when photo montages were shown in which she appeared without clothes. The images were found in a folder on her father's computer called About My Naked Daughter. According to investigators, the figure of 200 annual abuses against Giselle is an approximate figure. In fact, it is suspected that it could exceed 30 abuses per year, about 5 to 6 sadomasochistic abuses per week for 9 years. The accused will be tried over the next few weeks. However, the investigations continue. There are still 30 other abusers to be identified who are about to discover their identity and whereabouts. On the other hand, it is believed that dozens of other suspects have disappeared and it will be difficult to identify and locate them. In turn, the legal consequences for the accused are severe. Dominic faces a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. The other 50 men, who mostly claim to have thought that the woman was pretending to be asleep or that they had the husband's consent, also face similar sentences. Although it was a surprise for many to discover Dominic's true face, he actually had a much darker criminal history that dated back years before he started assaulting his wife. This discovery baffled everyone. The monster had been operating in the shadows for years, eluding justice and remaining invisible until that moment and for more than 3 decades. The judicial process unearthed even more sinister episodes from Dominique's past. And I tell you this because when his deoxyribonucleic acid was incorporated into the police files, he could be linked to unsolved crimes in the Paris region. In 1991, a 23-year-old young woman, for example, was abused and her life was taken. In 1999, another 19-year-old woman survived an attempted abuse, this in a small town on the outskirts of the French capital. And that's how these discoveries also, I tell you, add a new dimension to the already disturbing story of Dominique. Not only is he the perpetrator of a network of systematic abuses against his family, but he could also be a potential bully and serial abuser. According to the lawyer representing the 2 victims, Pelicot admitted to the attempted abuse but denied the homicide. However, investigations continue to be ongoing, unraveling more and more the depth of his mess. If his authorship in these crimes is confirmed, we would be facing a man who threatened an entire society for decades. His ability to operate with impunity for so long reveals a much greater threat than initially thought, leaving a deep and disturbing mark on the community and French justice. France, deeply shocked by these findings, closely follows the development of the trial, hoping that the full weight of the law falls on the man who has evaded justice for so long. While there is still much to be done, it is also hoped that this historic trial will not only drive legislative reforms, but also raise societal awareness that consent can manifest in various ways, not always requiring an explicit verbal response. But remember that every Monday on Pepe Misterio's channel, the interviews that are podcasts/documentaries are uploaded. If you put it on YouTube, remember that every Monday the interviews are uploaded. Which is like a podcast/documentary. If you put Pepe Misterio, it will come up at the top on YouTube, the list of these episodes.